Oh, hello. Today we are talking about books that I think are correctly hyped. So I did this trio probably 18 months ago, but recently I did my overhyped books. Today we're doing Believe the Hype books that I think the hype was deserved. And then next time, to round out the trio, we will do the underhyped. So today we are talking about books that were hyped to me and that I think deserve it, in the same spirit as 10 Things I Hate About You. We know you can be overwhelmed. We know you can be underwhelmed. Can you ever just be whelmed? You can indeed, at least in Europe, both in Europe and here in Nashville, in the sense of, yes, I think that there are some books that are very hyped, but when I actually read the books for myself, I felt like, yeah, you know what? I get why this book is hyped. It is as good as I was expecting it to be, and it met my expectations. Some of these books are like all-time favorites that I'm going to be talking about, so in talking about some of these, it's going to be weird because it's like, I love these books, but they were also hyped to me to a certain degree, or have been hyped since then, and they are as good as that very high bar that I think has been set for them. So I mentioned this in my last video, but I'll put it out here as well. I think that what is or isn't hyped is really different for everyone, depending on who you are looking at online and in your life for book reviews, or like getting your kind of like feedback loop with respect to reviews. So some books that may seem hyped to me may not be hyped to you. This is just based on sort of like the booktubers I watch, the book blogs I read, newspaper coverage I read, etc., just like my sense of where it is in the zeitgeist. But I don't actually have a lot to say about most of these, so I think what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna break these into genre buckets, and I don't know that I'll say a lot about them other than I just think that they were really good and as good as they had been pitched to me as being. So I guess we'll start with literary fiction and nonfiction and work our way from there. So in terms of some literary fiction that I think merits the hype, both of these are modern classics or classics to some degree, but they're not, how to say this, I mostly didn't include classics in here because if it has made like the quote unquote canon, like of course it's hyped, like it's by definition hyped, but I don't know, like I mostly leave classics off this list, but I felt like these were two that are kind of on the bubble of being classics, so I felt like they could be put into this category as deserving their hype. So first is like a coming of age classic, which is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, and this is about a really precocious girl who is coming of age in this kind of rundown old castle, and her learning more about the world around her and about herself. And it was written by the same gal who wrote 101 Dalmatians, and it has stood the test of time, I think, for a reason. And then Stoner by John Williams. This is a perfect novel. It follows our titular character Stoner for his entire life. He becomes an English professor eventually. It may not be everybody's kind of book, but I think for what it is trying to do, it is a perfect version of that, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, this is beautifully written, beautifully realized. A modern classic, and this has been hyped to me for years, and when I finally read it, I was honestly surprised it lived up to the hype because I had been hearing about how this was such a kind of like lost gem of a book for like 8 years before I finally actually read it, and it actually lived up to the hype for me. And then a few nonfiction picks. So first, The Great Influenza by John M. Barry. I believe that this won a big award the year it came out. It's definitely the Keck Award from the National Academies of Science. There you go. And this has been a very hyped book. It's come back into prominence because of COVID, re-looking at the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. This has been considered sort of like the book about that topic. It totally lived up to the hype for me in terms of really just like its writing is wonderful. Its history is really good. It's just like a super, super solid version of narrative nonfiction, especially about kind of like the history of science. So this definitely lived up to the hype for me. Similarly, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander is talking about basically how in the wake of the Civil War and then up through kind of like Jim Crow laws being made illegal, a lot of the sort of systematic oppression of Black people has shifted into the criminal justice system, and talking about ideas around like mass incarceration as a form of racial oppression. And these were ideas that I had heard about for a very long time. I'd seen her work referenced a lot before I read this book, but when I actually got to it, it was like, oh, the reason this gets referenced reference so much is not only is it just like a really interesting book, it's also a really impressively argued piece of historical nonfiction, like the argument it's making. I mean, there's definitely books that like disagree or like nuance what she's saying, but I think it's a very compelling argument, and actually it's sort of like epilogue is very prescient to kind of where Black Lives Matter has ended up taking us. So that definitely lived up to the hype for me. Then Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, and she said by, the two gals from the New York Times, and I can't remember their names right now. I can see the cover of this book, but I can't remember the authors. You're looking at the covers. These were two books that came out in the fall of 2019. They were both about the Harvey Weinstein scandal and all of the things surrounding it, as well as they took different kind of approaches to that same topic. And both were big bestsellers, and both really merited the amount of attention that they got. Incredibly interesting books, particularly Catch and Kill very much reads like, Bad Blood or All the President's Men in terms of like an investigative journalism kind of piece of nonfiction. But they were both just really impressively reported, very readable, obviously given the subject matter difficult to get through, but like both of those books are absolutely fantastic and well worth people's time to read. Okay, so then maybe we'll move over into romance. I got my little stack here. I'll start with the one that is not here, and that is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I was between putting this in the Believe the Hype and the Underhyped. I'm gonna leave it in the Believe the Hype. It's on the bubble because I don't think people understand how good these books are for what they are trying to do. If you are looking for campy, erotic, sci-fi romance, there is none better than the Ice Planet Barbarian series. It is, and the spinoff series Ice Home. Like, it does what it is trying to do with absolute excellence. It is so fun and so good. So I definitely think that it merits the hype it gets. I may be biased because at least on BookTube, I think I am a contributor to the hype. So for what it's worth, I do think it deserves it. Then with all of these other ones, we'll just start at the top and work our way down. Rafe by Rebecca Weatherspoon has one of the best subtitles of a romance ever, which is A Buff Male Nanny. Hilarious. This is a super great example of a cinnamon bun hero, or sort of like a very emotionally fluent hero. So I totally get why this was so hyped, because he is such a fun character, and his dynamic with the mom who he is nannying for is just really lovely. He has great chemistry with her kids. Like, it's just, I get it. This isn't, the only thing that let me down a little bit in this is the transition from we like each other to like this is a forever thing, but I totally get why this one was so hyped up to me and why people told me I would love this. I do in fact love this. It's really just a very fun version of a contemporary. Beach Read was a really hyped up book last year, and I think for me part of what made this live up to the hype is just how good Emily Henry's writing is. I've read 2 novels from her now, and like just the quality of her prose is something that I think makes her versions of contemporary romance really special. It's not something you see all the time, and I totally see why this was a hyped book that particularly I think was trying to like get at people who may not normally read romance. Like, for instance, my friend Leanna from Leanna's Library wouldn't say she's known for loving a romance, but she really enjoyed this book and is going to read more from the author. So I think that this is a really good like gateway book, and it, for me at least, really lived up to the hype. The entire trilogy of the Brown sisters from Talia Hibbert, which came out, I guess over the last couple of years. Best one obviously being Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I absolutely adore this book. It's one of my very favorite romances I've ever read. And that whole trilogy, I think that it was a real breakout for Talia Hibbert. She is somebody who people, including myself, had enjoyed her work in independently published romance when she was self-pubbing. And this was kind of her big major pub breakout. And it's really exciting to see somebody like Talia Hibbert, who I think is just incredibly talented, get some time in the sun. So anyway, this was a very hyped up trilogy. And again, Leanna, I think for the Blades and Bodice Ripper book club, she ended up reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and really enjoyed it. So again, I think she's another one you can give to people who may not normally read romance, and I think possibly could get them into it. The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. This is one that was really hyped up the year it came out. I'd never heard of Beth O'Leary. This might be her debut, I'm not sure, but this had kind of a high premise in terms of it's 2 people who are sharing an apartment, falling in love, but they've never met because one of them works night shift, one of them works days, so they have an arrangement. It's like a 1 bedroom, and it's a flat share where they are sleeping in the same bed, but not at the same time. And then they end up falling in love. And this was just like, again, kind of just different, a different voice than we normally get in contemporary romance. I think this is verging into like women's fiction or like upmarket fiction, but this one at least is indeed a romance. I really enjoyed this one. It was very hyped to me. I know that not everybody loves this, but for me, this really worked. And then another very hyped up debut that for me lived up to the hype / I was, I think, a part of hyping this one up on BookTube, but Well Met by Jen DeLuca. I again think this is a great example of really fun contemporary romance that has some romantic comedy, like rom-com kind of beats to it, but it's not fully a rom-com. It is a contemporary romance. It is slow burn. It's sort of like antipathy to love, and it takes place at a Ren fair, so that just makes it super charming. I've given this to some people who don't normally read romance, and they have enjoyed it, and yeah, I think that this one really lived up to all of its hype the year it came out. One for mystery thriller horror that I thought I would mention is Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Again, this was a big breakout novel for him last year that, I mean, he's published several things before this one, but this was really his big breakout. It got a big push, and his writing is what I think makes this really special. I could not put this book down. I know this book did not work completely for everyone, but just in terms of the fact that this was such like a big hit in terms of its actual sales, I think this definitely counts as a hyped book, and I personally very much enjoyed it. I'll also try to remember to link, I hosted a panel that he was on here on the channel last spring, so it was fun to chat with him, and I'm happy to say I also very, very much enjoyed his book. Okay, a couple of sci-fi I thought I would mention. One is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is another one that is a big hyped one by virtue of the fact that it got so much press kind of in the literary bookish side of the internet. Like this is like this literary speculative book that everybody was enjoying in the year that it came out in 2019. And for me, this was my first collection from him. I already have his second one because I really want to read more short stories from him. Very impressed with the writing and just sort of like his range as a storyteller. There's a lot of different kinds of stories in this one. So this one definitely lived up to the hype for me. And then Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a dystopia YA, kind of it looks like a utopia because there is no more need to die, but we've got this cadre of ominous reapers who are called Scythe, who kill people at their own discretion. And I just think this is an incredibly strong book. The writing is really, really good. I think thematically for YA, it goes there in a way that I wish more YA would. Like, I think the ideas it's wrestling with are genuinely like profound, and I appreciate it taking its young readers seriously in that way. And I have started but not yet finished Thunderhead, which is the second book, and I'm also very much enjoying it. So all around, this one definitely lived up to the hype for me. And this is a very hyped book on YouTube, so this is one YouTube made me read, and I'm glad they did. Actually, YouTube / my work book club. Somebody picked this, so yeah. And then the last stack is fantasy. One that I don't have here in physical form is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. That whole series is middle grade fantasy. It's got a magical boarding school or a magical school kind of setting. It's got sort of like the chosen one aspect to it. There's a lot of sort of like fan favorites of middle grade fantasy in there, but I think that this is executed on a higher level than most middle grade fantasy I've read. It's just a very compellingly written book. So are the subsequent books in that series. I don't have the same emotional connection to it as I do with another middle grade fantasy we'll talk about, but just in terms of like appreciating it as a book and being able to see why it's hyped, 100%. It totally, for me, lives up to the hype. And then last year, a very hyped book was The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, and I think this one completely merits the hype. And people just talk about how charming this book is and how whimsical, and it just is. Like, this is one of the most whimsical and charming adult books I've ever read. Now, granted, there are a lot of kids in this, so that might be part of it, but it just I always say that this feels like a warm hug of a book. It really, really does. Like, in terms of just speculative, lovely book that does have a strong romantic element to this. I think you could argue this is speculative romance. Yeah, this is just very, very lovely. A classic of fantasy that definitely has lived up to the hype for me is the Realm of the Elderlings series so far. I have read the first 3, and while I have critiques of them, the hype I get, because it's just Robin Hobb as a writer. Oh my gosh, who is doing it like Robin Hobb these days? Like, I don't know if anyone is. Her writing is really just spectacular, and there's something that's very cozy about these books. These feel very nostalgic, even though I'd never read them before, because they just remind me of the like young fantasy stuff I was reading in the 90s. This reminds me of Tamora Pierce. This reminds me of Diana Wynne Jones, but like the adult version, because like shit gets real in these books. But yeah, this totally, it's kind of a modern fantasy classic. I think it really lives up to the hype for me. Speaking, as I was earlier, of a fantasy middle grade series that just has my heart, that is the Percy Jackson series. Incredibly hyped, like some of the most hyped books I've read in quite some time, and for me, more than met my expectation. The first couple of books, like the first one I was like, oh yeah, this is really fun. I get why people like this. I kept going and I was like, yeah, this is still fun. Like I'll kind of dip in and out of this. This is good. The third book in this series, like, takes it to the next level, and by the time you get to this last, like the fifth book in the original series, oh my gosh, it is so good. And I did not read these as a kid. I am coming to this with fresh eyes as an adult reader, and as an adult reader of middle grade fantasy, for me, this more than lived up to the hype. I am committed to seeing through all of the Uncle Rick books, and I'm so thankful I gave this a try, because this has been such a lovely element of my reading. I was gonna mention the Poppy War series from R.F. Kuang. This has been an incredibly hyped military, very dark adult fantasy series in the last few years, and this trilogy, man, it just goes there. I think she has such a distinct vision that I think is different than a lot of the adult fantasy we've gotten for a long time. And I feel like this book sort of represents a lot of really exciting things that I see happening now in adult fantasy and just fantasy in general. Like I'm just really excited by this trilogy, and I think it more than lives up to the hype. Of course, these are books that are not going to work for everyone because they are very violent and very dark in a lot of ways. But for me, those elements really worked, and absolutely love this trilogy. Deserves all the praise it's gotten and more, in my opinion. And while I have not yet finished this trilogy that is on my to-do list for this year, so far what I have read of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, I think definitely lives up to the hype. I've read the first one, I gave this 4 stars. I'm excited to keep going. These are not the first grimdark fantasy books, but I think that between this and George R.R. Martin, it kind of like repopularized the idea of sort of grimdark things in fantasy. So I'm excited to catch up with this original trilogy and potentially keep going even beyond that. And then finally, my favorite book of last year, another book that I feel like I helped contribute to the hype on, but for me, I was so excited to see Rebecca Roanhorse getting more love with this series last year. I mean, I think there was a lot of hype with her Six Worlds series, but I feel like this book really like took her up a level in people's eyes, and I'm excited because I just love pretty much everything I've ever read from her. And this is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, my favorite book of the year last year, my perfect high fantasy. It's not everybody's version of what they like in high fantasy, but for me, this is what I love in high fantasy. So hyped, more than deserves that hype in my opinion, and a book I love. So those were books from like the end of 2019 through 2020 that I feel like deserve the hype that they have gotten. Sometimes I have been contributing to the hype that they have gotten very happily because yeah, just a lot of books I loved in a short amount of time. I enjoy this positivity. I'm about to film my underhyped video and I will get to continue that positivity, so yay for me. Definitely let me know what you thought of any of these books that I talked about, or a book that you feel like deserves the hype that you've read recently. Let me know that in the comments below. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!